My name is Alicia Nordstrom, and I'm a professor of psychology here at Misericordia University. I've been here for about 12 years now in the psychology department. So the Voices Project started in 2009 as a class assignment to help students explore and evaluate the meaning of difference in society. And so I wanted my students, particularly in Intro to Psychology, which is a core general education class, to begin to think about how and why we label people as quote-unquote different. This year I embarked on focusing the Voices Project entirely on mental health conditions. We're not socialized to be able to talk about having mental health conditions in everyday conversation. People are forced to feel ashamed and embarrassed when they have depression, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, and usually the last thing they want to do is tell someone else. So I partnered with a faculty member in the English department, Dr. Amanda Caleb, and we put our classes together, and we had 50 students embark on interviews, which meant that I needed to find 50 people that had mental health conditions and were willing to talk about it.
My first experience with mental illness came when, after I gave birth to my son, he was my second child, I rapidly fell into the hole that now is called PPD, which is postpartum depression.
They told me 3 years ago. I've been clinically depressed my whole life. I think I've had bipolar my whole life too, but they clinically diagnosed it about 3 years ago. But depression itself, I've had my whole life. The doctor asked me at First Valley when I first became depressed, and I told him when I came out of the womb. This is my husband. This is David Farrelly, and he was diagnosed in 1988, at the end of 1988, actually. And he just passed away in May of this year. So David had Alzheimer's for 27 and a half years. David was a very intelligent man, and the point I'm making is that Alzheimer's can hit anybody. It doesn't matter your intellect, it doesn't matter your education, it's, it can come at anybody.
3 days after the christening, I was in the psych unit at First Valley. I was scared to death in there. I was scared of the patients, I was scared of the staff. There was no rest, there was no magic pill, there was nothing. I was actually exhibiting like physical symptoms at that point. I was vomiting, I was sick, I was faint, So after 3 days, I signed myself out, AMA, against medical advice. One of the worst symptoms of my depression was this weird psychotic phenomenon. Some people call it derealization, some people call it depersonalization, where you feel like you're just looking at yourself doing things. You're going through life, but you're always aware of you're like acutely aware of yourself. It's like if you're giving a speech in front of a large crowd, you're nervous, you're anxious, you're talking, you're giving a speech, but you're aware of everything, your body movements, your breathing, what your clothes feel like on your body. It was just like a super awareness of yourself that made you at the same time feel removed from the reality of the situation.
When you're on a high, you're on a high. And when I'm on a high, I shop. When I'm on a low, I just want to curl up in the bed and cry. It's just that there's no happy medium. You're either up or you're down.
Yeah.
You're trying to find that medium where I could be both, but it's like I've been in psych hospitals, I'm not ashamed to say. As I told you, I told the one doctor I've had it since I was born. And it's just something I have to live with. But
Yeah.
it's not easy.
Yeah.
It's not easy at all. You see everybody else's life seems to be going on, you know, and they're doing this and doing that. I'm probably sitting on the couch crying while they're out and about. I don't say I have all bad days, but it's always in my head.
Mhm.
That sadness is always there. Although I do get out and I get out with my friends and, you know, we have good times then. But even when I go out with my friends and I know we're nearing home, I start to get nervous because I think I'm going back into that house and all I have to do is have a brain that's going to make me crazy.
Yeah.
He called me at work one day, and he had Western Union on the line with his daughter, and he was trying to forward some money to her. And I mean, he's an engineer, and he said, "Kay, I have Western Union on the line, and I can't remember my address and my social security number." And I'm like, oh, bammo. It just hit me right in my gut because of his sister having it first. I said, he's the same age, and he can't remember something as basic as that, and he's an engineer.
Right.
So something's up here. Most people who get early onset Alzheimer's or dementia, that's before age 60, as I said, they are gone within 5 to 6 years. I mean, they pass away within 5 or 6 years. It's usually very progressive, a rapid progression. David was just the opposite. So he wasn't on the scale like he should be at all. He was the other end of the spectrum. And all his symptoms were delayed from occurring, which we were blessed that way. You know, we were grateful. David had eventually very severe behavioral issues, you know, where he would, like I said, he would take off on me. I had to lock the doors, get deadbolts on all the doors, because I could try to keep him safe. Because he'd leave and I wouldn't know where he would go, you know.
Right.
And I couldn't let him do that because he'd get lost. So I had to get deadbolts on the doors, and he would get very angry sometimes, you know, if he didn't get what he wanted, but he never was really dangerous.
I woke up in the middle of the night. It seems like it's always 3:30 a.m. when you wake up in the middle of the night in a full-blown panic attack. I pretty much immediately knew what was happening, what was starting. So I pulled myself together enough, got the kids out to school. They were older now. My son was about 9, my daughter was a preteen. I called my mom and I said, it's happening again. This episode, I didn't know at that time what it was, lasted for 3 years. It had some of the same symptoms, the severe insomnia, the loss of appetite, the panic, the depersonalization, but there were no tears this time, no sadness. I was just totally numb, just devoid of all feelings, all emotion. I was like robotic. I felt like I was dead.
There's so many things out there that there's just not enough known. Even if I told you what I have, this reflex sympathetic dystrophy, there's thousands of people with it, yet most people have never heard of it. They don't have to live with it.
Yeah.
And that's also a depression, because, you
Yeah.
know, for 4 years that put me in bed. Well, it crippled me up, you know,
Yeah.
it twisted my spine, it chewed up my hips, and so then that was a depressive state. You know, for 4 years I was in a depression as well as a physical pain.
Yeah.
But I'm still here. For people like you to interview me and listen to me talk. But anytime there's anything like this or anything with the medical, I'm right there, because
Yeah.
I know there's other people with it just as there is me, but I don't know anybody with it, so it's hard to relate when they don't live with it,
Yeah.
you know.
My mom was diagnosed with cancer, and there was really no one except for me even in my state of mind, to become her caregiver. So because I would lose so much time in the day program, they released me early. I had to take her for treatments every day. I had to take her to doctor's appointments. I had to cook for her. I became her total caregiver. And slowly, that act of having to break outside of my own self and care for someone else who had cared for me for so long, made me start to think more clearly.
I miss him very much. I loved him very much, and he loved me. And we were married almost 36 years. He was in a nursing home the last 6 years of his life, and I was there most every other day or so with him. And so he still was so much a part of my life. You know, he was the center of it, really. And so I miss him terribly because he did know me all the way to the end. I was very fortunate with David. That was another special thing with him. He never stopped knowing who I was. And so I was able to still, in my own way, communicate with him all the way to the end. And he with me, mostly just through, his looks or touch it, whatever. But I'm also happy for him because he's free finally from this horrible disease and he's not suffering anymore. He's not in a nursing home anymore. He's with the Lord. He got us through all these years. And now he's getting his reward with him. And he's free and healthy and strong again. So I'm happy for him. But I have a big hole in my heart.
Right.
My sister, I told you, is a teacher, and I told her she could never understand me. And like I said, when she found out her daughter had it, it was almost a blessing the day my niece said to me, she said, I think Mommy finally understands you, Aunt Darlene, because now she has me to deal with. Because, if you really aren't dealing with it, because she went through a lot with her daughter before she was diagnosed, and the same thing as the ups and downs and lows and highs. But it was funny, it took my niece to open my sister's eyes as to what I live with every day.
My daughter is now expecting her first child, so I don't alarm her, but I watch her closely, and I will watch her closely. And maybe that's one of the reasons I went through what I did, because I'll have to help her in some way. Or, in some strange way, maybe it will prevent her from going through everything that I did.
Some people are going to have really huge stories. You always want to try and capture it as closely as possible to how your interviewee has experienced this mental health condition. We want you to build a relationship with this person. You're going to assume responsibility of their story.
A few friends of hers had passed away in about 2012, 2013. And my daughter was never into any kind of drugs. She was like a princess cheerleader. She was great. And I never would have thought she would turn to drugs ever. She did have a history of depression, anxiety. After one of her friends had passed away, though, at the funeral, I remember saying, oh my God, thank God, would never be my daughter. This would never be her. I would never have to go through this. And not too long later, she had called me at work and said she needed help, and we're very close, so she always came to me for everything. She needed help and that she was addicted to heroin.
It was kind of weird having people watch me eat, or you look healthier, or you look better, and so I wasn't really, I guess, prepared for that. But other than that, I don't think people really realized it until I talked about it in class. Because a lot of people thought it was just a matter of, oh, you just have to eat and then you're going to do better. Or, oh, just stop throwing up. Or, stuff like that. But an eating disorder is so much more than that. And I actually kind of just admitted it like a year and a half ago. When it was for the first time. So that stuck with me. Like, I didn't really think I meant anything to anyone. My dad never wanted me, just stuff like that. An eating disorder is about taking control back from all those bad things that have happened to you. So it's not really so much about wanting to be pretty, wanting to be skinny. It's about taking control back from, whatever circumstance you may have gone through.
I hid in my house. I hid in a bathroom, and the visual and the tactile hallucinations followed me. And then the very next morning, I asked for help. I'm a little bit unique because I wasn't diagnosed with anything till the age of 35. I did not experience any signs of mental illness before that age. Schizophrenia was not part of my diagnosis. My initial diagnosis was chronic depression. And then they added bipolar to it. And then eventually schizophrenia and then schizoaffective. Diagnoses to me aren't important. To me, diagnoses are communication between the insurance companies and the doctors to get bills paid. To me, they're not all that important.
Heroin attacks the opiate receptors, so you're never the same again. Your mental status is always, nothing's ever the same after you use heroin. Nothing. That person that you were is, if you're lucky to get it back, you can, but it's not easy. She was always tired, obviously. Heroin addiction causes, obviously, it's like a downer, so it causes them to be tired. They're tired. They're always looking for that next fix, so she was always on edge if she didn't have that. Just a huge difference. It just was like a shell of a person. It wasn't her anymore. When she went into detox and got onto the Suboxone, the mental status, the mental changes are almost worse than the withdrawal process. When she came home, she had relapsed. And another problem is that there's not enough beds, there's not enough help in this area, especially with the epidemic going on right now. So the second time she had relapsed, getting her into a rehab was almost impossible. I was off of work on an FMLA for a few weeks. Every day I sat there and I had a notebook and I called every place from here to Florida to try to get her into a rehab, and there was no one.
August 6th of 2015, I went to a doctor's appointment, and that was actually to see an eating disorder specialist. And they did all of my vitals, and my vitals were extremely bad. My heart rate was 30. My blood pressure was 80/40 something. My temperature was 93. My kidneys weren't really working. The EKG basically, I was pretty much almost flatlined. And she called an ambulance and she said, if you don't go, I'm going to 302 you, which is, they're going to make me go. And 5% of me wanted to live. And I'm like, okay, fine. I'm going to go, in the ambulance to the ER just to see what they say. And I remember being in the ambulance, being hooked up to two IVs, one in each arm. My mom's flipping out, because she doesn't know what's going to happen. And the doctor's like, if she doesn't go, she could die tomorrow. So my mom let my dad, my stepdad, and my husband know. And they were anywhere from an hour to 3.5 hours away. And the next day at 7 a.m, doctors came in to do testing on my heart. And 4 hours later, I was having my pacemaker put in.
On the audio side, I have audio hallucinations 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I have not had a moment of silence inside of my head since December 2nd, 2010. Some of the audio hallucinations is just noise. Some of it is commands. Some of it is just talk. Some of it's positive. Some of it's negative. Some of the voices argue with each other and I think some of it's for my protection. It's weird. On the visual side, visually I see things coming out of holes. What I see is usually mechanical bug type of critters. I call them spiders, but they don't look anything like a spider. And usually they're metallic and they have weapons with them. Most people don't believe that I have a mental illness when they first meet me and I disclose that I do. Just a real simple example, went to a foot doctor, gave a list of medication that I'm on because they were trying to think if they needed to do some medication for me. Asked what the medication was, I told him what it was for. His response, you don't look like you're mentally ill. And I asked the question, what does mental illness look like? I lost almost all of my memory from extensive shock treatments. I was supposed to lose short-term memory, and I ended up losing a lot. And I found through social media from people that I went to school with and around the year that I graduated, I'm talking high school, they would be willing to give me memory back. They would tell me stories about myself. They would give me places that I could visit, and eventually I'm able to get some of the memories back.
It was more, hard isn't the word.
Yeah.
And it's still.
There's probably really no word. to
There
describe.
isn't, no. It's still very difficult because mental changes that someone goes through. Depression, she still fights with depression, anxiety, every day of her life. So picture waking up in the morning and I have to stop a minute.
Okay. Take your time.
I get upset because it is an everyday struggle. But picture waking up in the morning and the only thing you have to look forward to is your baby. The depression is just terrible. The heroin ruins your life forever. I mean, you touch that heroin one time and it destroys your entire life and your family.
I had many friends when I was here at Misericordia for my undergrad, but when I relapsed just last summer, I was very depressed, so I really wanted nothing to do with my faith. And my husband's a youth pastor, so as a youth pastor's wife, you're kind of expected to have a lot to do with the church, and I had nothing to do with the church. Mm-hmm. So I isolated a lot. I wouldn't go out to eat with my family, which we love to do. We're Italian, and we're German, so we love get-togethers. I didn't celebrate my husband's birthday. We were actually only together for less than a year. So, during that first year, it's kind of that honeymoon phase of your marriage. Mm-hmm. And it was really hard for us to be married because of how sick I was. So, those kind of problems were hard for us.
I don't have a lot of fear through the community itself. I think when the community reacts that I have a mental illness, it gives me a chance to let people know that, okay, I'm a face of mental illness. I'm not the stereotype that you're seeing on the news or in movies or things like that. 70% of mentally ill in movies is depicted on the negative side. But the reality is only 4% of people that have mental illness are on the negative side of things.
Does the media do justice to mental disorders in general?
No. Plain and simple, no, they don't. And I think because of some of the times with my hallucinations, I have the media on all the time, whether it be movies, music, whatever. I need a noise fluctuation, and I developed a very, very strong liking to talk radio, because above and beyond music, talk, the fluctuations in talk help my voices. So I'm listening to local talk radio and national talk radio quite often. Now, the media does try their best to put the voice of mental illness out there. I've been interviewed for a local radio station before. But for the most part, the attitude is if something bad happens, they got to be mentally ill. And the media portrays it that way. I've even heard with the train accident that happened yesterday, mental illness might have been a factor. I've already heard that, and we don't even know why that train crashed, and yet I'm already hearing that.
So, the mental changes still to this day affect her. When she had her baby, it seemed like something lit up, like that she had something to live for. And now, to this day, that's pretty much what she lives for, is her daughter. And like through the depression and the anxiety, which she still does have, my granddaughter's father takes her on the weekends, and when she doesn't have her, she pretty much is in bed and doesn't do much of anything. But when she comes home, her face lights up again. I always tell her I just want to see her real smile again, and she does do that when she's with the baby.
I switched from nursing. I was actually 1 semester away from getting my BSN.
Wow.
And I realized that it just wasn't for me. I was doing it for my parents. My mom's a nurse. So I was doing it for them. I'm not going to lie. I was doing it for the money. But I realized that my heart was really in psych, and it was really in counseling. And when I look back, a lot of people say I'm crazy, but I think of what I went through as a blessing, because I really can help people and understand them better, because I just don't have the book smart. I have the experience, to actually relate to them, whether it's a drug and alcohol addiction, which that's not something I've dealt with, but I did have an addiction. It was to food, it was to laxatives, it was to other things like that. So on that level, I can relate, somehow.
I'll tell you just right out, and I say this to a lot of people and they don't understand it. Other than financially, this is the best thing that's ever happened in my life. For the very first time, I looked at who I was and what I stood for. I learned how to say no, and I learned how to say yes. I learned what my boundaries were and what my boundaries weren't. When I realized with everything that I was going through, I was still okay. That's where the recovery side of my story started. And I don't like the word recovery, honestly. I'm on a journey. That's what I am. I'm on a journey. Embrace it. Try to understand it. And honestly, just gratitude. Find gratitude. And gratitude, gratitude sounds simple. I'm assuming you find gratitude in a lot of things. Did you ever ask yourself why, though? Why are you feeling grateful that the sun came up? Why are you grateful that that flower looks pretty? Did you ever ask yourself why? Because if you did, then it means something to you. It's more than just seeing the sunrise. It's more than just seeing a flower. It actually means something. And, I guess with anybody going through any struggle in life, whether it's mental illness or not, whether it's schizoaffective or not, find gratitude. And there's gratitude in every event that's out there. Even if it sounds horrific, there's gratitude in it to be found. But you gotta work hard at it.
The Voices Project has several purposes, and one of which is to capture the real voices or life stories of people from misunderstood or stigmatized groups in society. But when it comes to my students, the purpose for them is to reduce stereotypes, stigma, and prejudice. It seems maybe odd to just stick that into normal conversation, but to me, to reduce the stigma of mental illness means exactly that there's no stigma if it's just something that's accepted as typical practice for me to talk about and to share. So I could share my mental health just like I could share any other part of myself.